Sorry, it was a bit of a vague title and a bit of might be misleading. I'm not here to talk about unity between our two organisations. You had your chance during the miners' strike. What I'm going to talk on really is sort of how I think revolutionaries should respond to the combination of the SWP's Unity letter and the No to EU initiative, or post-No to EU initiative that's being developed, and really a bit on what lessons we can learn of the attempts to forge some sort of united alliance against Labour over the last period, which is what I'm going to talk about. Because I think we should start off by saying that it's quite clear the SWP is not talking about revolutionary unity amongst revolutionary groups. It's actually talking about an electoral alliance, in which the general election is obviously focusing the left, and obviously neither are the core groups of the No to EU campaign talking about revolutionary unity. That is the Socialist Party, the CPB, the Communist Party of Britain, and the RMT, the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union. What they're talking about is how to bring together some sort of alternative to Labour at the coming general election, which probably will be in May next year. And I think the first thing one should say is that if you look back to 1997, when Labour was elected, we've had a series of failed projects, organisations that have attempted to pose an alternative to a neoliberal New Labour Party. We've had the Socialist Labour Party of Arthur Scargill, we've had the Scottish Socialist Party, we've had the Socialist Alliance, we've had Respect, all of which in one form or another tried to build a united left movement in Britain, to sort of try and develop a alternative to the Labour Party. And what one can say is that, in fact, out of that, if you look at the wreckage of those several attempts, you can say that the British left has done very badly over that period. In fact, the far left in Britain is probably smaller now than it was in 1997. And in some ways that's not surprising, because I think what the British left has shown is generally, historically, that it's very unable to grow and develop under a reformist government. It's very good at growing under Tory governments when it manages to, join in with the anti-Tory struggles and has generally grown. But even if you go back to the Labour governments of 74, 79, in fact, the British left went into a period of crisis in that period, because it couldn't manage to develop a political alternative to a very strong and well-rooted reformist party, not just the Labour Party itself, but in the trade unions and in the trade union leaders. So I think that's probably one of the things that we should perhaps discuss why that is the case. I spoke a debate with the Alliance for Workers' Liberty. They had a debate at their school with several organisations, including the Alliance for Green Socialism that was part of No to EU. And I said that permanent revolution actually comes at this question from a different angle. And the different angle is that we're not obsessed with electoralism. And one would have to say that over the last 10 years, the British far left has become completely obsessed with electoral politics and standing in elections. And it's become obsessed with it from a reformist point of view. And I think if you look at the election of George Galloway, as a reformist, supported by the ostensibly revolutionary left. If you look at, for example, the Socialist Party and how it gets elected, often good militants from its organisation as councillors, and it has, I think, 4 or 5 councillors in Coventry and Lewisham. And our experience of those councillors, for example, in Lewisham, our comrades were involved in leading a struggle to stop a school being transformed into a possibly academy, whatever, but it was about moving the school, and the kids were being bused to an alternative site. And we led a roof occupation there along with a parents' organisation. And it was very instructive that the 2 Socialist Party councillors in Lewisham had to be dragged kicking and screaming into that particular struggle. And the first thing they said was they weren't going to set foot on the roof, they weren't going to be identified with the campaign, because that would likely jeopardise their position on the planning committee of Lewisham Council. And once they'd lost their independence, they couldn't sort of, come in. And I think it just sums up a perspective that, in fact, the Socialist Party, when it gets into these positions in local councils, it has virtually a perspective indistinguishable from reformism in terms of its electoral strategy. Now, we start from a very different method, in the sense that we think the Marxist method in relation to elections is that general elections are very important political events where the working class as a whole is faced with political choices, and it will be in May. It'll be faced with the political choice of, do we elect a Tory government that's going to introduce swinging cuts into the public services, or do we elect the Labour, Party, Labour government that has, carried on over the last period, both its reactionary wars, plus it's, putting in very large resources into the National Health Service and expanding other public sector purposes. And the key debate in the coming election is going to be who's going to pay for the crisis, who's going to pay for the dramatic debts that the government has taken on with bailing out the banks, the billions and billions. And you can already see it in the press, where the whole ruling class media argument is about, we've got to pay off these debts, and we've got to pay off these debts by cutting back on public expenditure. So those big political issues of what's the alternative are always posed in general elections, and that's why Marxists intervene in those elections and why they're so important, because they allow you to raise very general political programmes and alternative socialist programmes, alternative socialist action programmes to what the bourgeoisie and the bourgeois parties are actually putting forward in elections. But the real purpose of those elections is not to get elected, as it isn't in municipal elections. The real purpose for Marxists of intervening in elections is to build local campaigns, if you're supporting class struggle candidates, to build a revolutionary party by recruiting people in those campaigns to a fighting campaign, or build up a network locally that can carry on the fight after the elections. The least important thing in those elections is the large number of votes or the attempt to win a position, although votes do register your political support and do register support for alternative socialist and revolutionary programmes, which is important. So in that sense, when the Socialist Workers' Party suggested that, or put forward its unity proposal, that everyone should come together and struggle, and it was clearly from the point of view we should come together and struggle for an alliance in the next election, to fight both Labour and the Conservatives and put forward a left or alternative, we said, you've actually got this the wrong way round. You're not going to strengthen working class organisations and working class struggle